because that was kind of a constant. No matter where I would be, there would be athletic programs I could get into. And then I think more so the idea that, athletes were the cool kids in school. The athletes were the popular kids in school. The athletes were the ones at the cool kid lunch table, and they were respected and they were maybe even feared. And I think that's really what drew me to sports more so than a love of the game. Of course, I did enjoy playing, but I think that I was more drawn to that. So, I attribute a lot of my resilience that I have today, which is a huge ingredient in achievement and overcoming adversity and success in general, to that hardship of the way that I was raised. And it's not solely having to face those fears daily and the struggle and the discomfort. It's actually that coupled with having amazing people in my life that would provide me guidance. And I'm talking more specifically about both my parents. And they had me very, very young. My father had me, he was 20. So he's a kid trying to figure out how to be a dad and put food on the table. So I've had recent conversations with both my parents about this. Like, were you just that forward thinking in social sciences and psychology and childhood development? Because what they did an amazing job of is they would give me that guidance and give me some tools and some techniques and let me know that I was loved. But they would not remove the adversity for me. They didn't keep me in this bubble. They would give me some assistance, and then conditioning your body, your lungs, your mind. It's a product of that hot and cold contrast through repetition over time with consistency. And I was a product of that growing up. Both my parents are like, no, we didn't know what the hell we were doing. We were just trying to do the best we could, which is pretty typical for, I'd say, most parents, regardless of how young they are when they have kids. So I attribute a lot of my current mental toughness and a lot of my current successes as a result of that kind of upbringing.
Did you have a lot of doubts that you had to tackle at a young age?
Oh yeah, I was riddled with doubts, and trying to. The irony of this as well is, as a young kid, and I speak for myself, and I would probably speak on behalf of a lot of kids and young people, is you're trying to fit in. And you want to be accepted and you want to be welcomed into a particular community, or maybe even any community, which was my case. So I almost found myself becoming this kind of chameleon where the new spot, I would find a person or group and then just try to assimilate to them, regardless if it was anything that I was interested in doing, whether it was music or comic books or this particular subject in school or this particular sport. It was I just wanted to be accepted by people around me. And so that comes with a lot of doubt because, 12 months later or less, I'm in a new spot and I'm like, am I still that I was trying to be for the last year or so? Or am I trying to be someone new and something different? So yeah, it was a pretty consistent internal self-doubt roller coaster ride that I would be going on. And then, down the line, as I was trying to overcome some pretty monumental adversity, I dealt with the same thing. So, these are skills. These are learned behaviors, resilience, mental toughness, grit. These are learned behaviors. These are skills. And like any skill that you want to learn and be better at, requires repetition, ideally purposeful, deliberate repetition. And while I didn't ask for those reps when I was 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, I got them anyway. And that's really where the foundation was built and how I was able to kind of continue to compound on top of it.
When did you know that you wanted to go into the service? And did you know that you wanted to go into special forces?
I began looking at the military when I was in high school, really for the same reason that I was drawn to athletics. I was trying to fill this massive void. I was this small, scared, insecure kid who lived most of my life in fear. And I wanted to experience the other end of that spectrum. I wanted strength. I wanted to be respected. I wanted to be feared because I had lived scared for so long. And so the military, I felt like, could give me that outlet. And the only thing that I think really stopped that from happening out of high school was I got recruited to play football in college, which is the only reason why I went to college. I was a horrible student. I did the bare minimum just to skate by. But at this point, I was decent in athletics, and I really excelled in football particularly. So the only reason I went to college was for that. And then the beginning of my sophomore year, I just turned 19 years old, was 9/11. And that was really the tipping point for me. That was the catalyst for me. And I
Mm-hmm.
really struggled to stay in school because I knew where we were going as a nation and I wanted to be part of that response. I stayed in school. I grinded out the rest of my degree, which was this huge challenge and a struggle. And then I began looking at options to come into the military right after that. I felt like I wanted to go directly into special operations. I wanted to get into special operations as soon as possible. I felt like my physical attributes could be best utilized there. And I think more so than that, I wanted to make as much of a difference a single person can make. It was not intended to be a career for me or a profession or a lifestyle. This was come in, get to the front of the fight, kick some ass, get some justice, and then get out of the army and figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life. And as I started shopping different recruiters and looking at the different options, I ultimately landed on the Army Special Forces because one, it gave me the fastest route to get directly to that unit, which is an option that still exists today. It's known as the 18 X-ray contract option, otherwise known as a Special Forces recruit, which gives guys off the street the chance to bypass serving anytime in the conventional Army. So I was enticed by that. And then I had begun doing a little bit of research on what Green Berets do because I really didn't know. I'd seen the movies and John Wayne and like Rambo, but I had no idea what Green Berets actually did. So I began doing some homework, and I was really drawn to the different mission sets that special forces are expected to do, particularly the more well known and kind of our primary one being that of unconventional warfare.
I want to back up a hair. You mentioned you stuck out college for the next 2 years, but you hated it. And how did you show up for yourself every single day doing something you didn't like to do?
Well, I mean, in college, I oftentimes didn't. I would procrastinate. I would put things off. I lived a somewhat typical college athlete lifestyle. As long as I was eligible, I was to play. I was more than fine with that. So I avoided a lot of the hard things in college, and I started making some really knucklehead-like decisions and some really horrible choices that could have very easily taken my life in an entirely different direction. Again, I think I was overcompensating for basically an entire life of insecurity and doubt and fear. And I began to, at this point, I began to develop my body physically. I really started to grow into myself, and I was this really big, strong, athletic individual. And I began wielding that in ways in which I'm not exactly proud of. So I didn't live a very disciplined lifestyle, and it really wasn't very structured. Playing ball was the only thing that kind of gave me even anything kind of positive direction to be employing myself. So I kicked a lot of things down the road, and I like this point specifically because some will read my book or watch a video on me or hear me at a conference or something and kind of get this idea that I was always this way. Like I was groomed to be, or I always lived this very disciplined, structured, work ethic driven lifestyle, which is totally inaccurate. That really didn't come about for me until I pivoted my life into a more positive direction. I decided to enter the military, and once I graduated school, and although a lot of those foundational aspects were there, it was buried. It was buried under a lot of insecure and poor decision making. So the military is really what began extracting that from me, and then layering on additional skill within those areas on top of it.
So when you decided to fast track to special forces, did you train prior to all that? Like, how when you just say, I'll do it tomorrow, and then tomorrow never comes, and then you develop the habit of just putting things off. Well, it sounds to me like you developed that in school where you put things off and you were procrastinating and you didn't have that discipline. So how did you re-get that discipline to then have the success that you had to even make it through special forces?
Yeah, it's a good question because, I said that the military really began to pull that from me, and I would stand by that. If you backed up that time horizon a little bit prior, it was once I decided that I was going to enter the military and I was going to become a Green Beret. That was really what began me taking things a lot more seriously. And, I was always in the gym and I was always training my body and, doing martial arts and boxing. But like living an athletic lifestyle was just normal for me. But it really wasn't all that structured and really well thought out. And there wasn't a whole lot of intent attached to it. I was doing a lot of things physically, but without an intent, like a desired end state that's associated with the task. You can do things all day long. You're not necessarily progressing towards anything. In my opinion, you need to have a target to be working towards. So once I made the decision, like I'm going to become a Green Beret, now I had a target and now I had an intent and I had great people around me, my strength coaches to help me kind of dial in what I was doing. So what ended up being, about 18 weeks or 20 weeks, I put myself through this like crazy training program, mostly physical, but I began reading and studying a little bit of stuff about the military and just how they operate. So I'd say it got a little more dialed in prior to me actually going to basic training. Mm-hmm. And that is the result of me having an identified mission.
Today's podcast episode is brought to you by my absolute favorite company. If you know me or seen videos or photos of me, then you know I always have one on my wrist. I absolutely adore this company. DiscoverOmnia.com. DiscoverOmnia.com is the world's first smart crystal bracelet. Every single bracelet is handmade in the USA using real genuine crystals made on memory wire. Every bracelet is unisex and they're also aromatherapy. The cool part is the black onyx charm that is on the bracelet. It scans to your cell phone, connecting you to their Wellness Hub Elevate. You can also access their Wellness Hub Elevate on your computer or tablet. You just have to sign into your account. The bracelet gives you a 12-month membership. It has over 200 pieces of self-care content from motivational tips, meditations, breathing exercises, exercises around the theme of your bracelet, printable journals, and so much more. The content is ever growing. And that's not all. The bracelet also gives you lifetime access to their Elevate Together Club, which meets monthly via Zoom. Each month is themed to give you actionable takeaways to elevate your life. And with this podcast episode, you get 40% off your purchase order by using the code Mindset Podcast. Use that code Mindset Podcast for 40% off. Just go to DiscoverOmnia.com. DiscoverOmnia.com, code Mindset Podcast for 40% off. Get your bracelet today. So then you go in and then tell us a little bit about, because again, you are the first Green Beret on the show, how the training process works and for yourself, like your experience going in. Did you know the challenges that you were going to be facing? Were there a lot of people that were quitting around you? Like what was going on for you?
Yeah. So by the time I got into the Army, I was 24 years old. It took me almost 7 years to graduate from college. That's how horrible of a student I was. So I was a grown man with a lot of life experience. So I show up to basic training and I got like 17, 18-year-old kids around me. And in my mind, I was already like ready to go, like get me to selection as soon as possible. I had this very like egotistical, like I'm going to dominate this whatever's in front of me, no matter what, based almost entirely on my physical characteristics and capabilities. So basic training, it was 16 weeks the way that I ended up going, because they basically stack basic training and advanced individual training right on top of each other, because you come in as an infantryman is the route you take if you come in as a special forces recruit. Therefore, if you don't make it as a Green Beret, then you are an infantryman, and then you end up going down the route of an infantry soldier. So my route was Fort Benning, basic training, straight into advanced individual training. From there, small break to airborne school, which is also at Fort Benning, Georgia. And then I had a break because the holidays were up and there was a lag. And then I arrived at Fort Liberty, North Carolina, and then began the actual special forces process or aspect of the training. And for 18 x-rays for the guys off the street, we would get a preparatory course prior to going into selection. And this was just to give us some kind of basic military or army fundamentals that most of us probably don't know, like knot tying, land navigation, these things that most soldiers would have at least an idea of how to do because they lived their lives as soldiers before going to selection. So they give us kind of a prep course in that. And really it's a lot of physical stuff. They're just basically beating the hell out of you physically and then teaching you classes in between. My journey was a little weird that like that condensed that course, which is supposed to be 5 weeks long or 6 weeks long, for me was only 5 days long. And then I ended up in selection much sooner than I anticipated, which was totally cool with me. I was ready to go, go to selection, which at the time I went was just 2 weeks long. Now it's closer to 3. I think it's 20 days, 21 days. You get selected. And then you begin the Special Forces qualification course, which for me took a little over a year, which is still right around average, depending on the actual job that you get, because there are certain specialties that you are taught when you're in the Q course. So for me, from the moment I got to basic training, it took about 2.5 years or so of training with these little kind of gaps in between before I ended up donning my Green Beret for the first time and then showing up to my unit.
Within those 2 years, were there a lot of people that were dropping out around you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, the attrition rate then was higher than it is now, but it's still high. Like my selection class had about 300 candidates that showed up on day one. And I want to say around 100 made it to the end. So about 2/3 quit or get injured during that 2 weeks. So you're left with about a third, about 100 candidates are left. And out of those 100, they selected about 60 or so, maybe 65, give or take. So out of the 300 that showed up on day one, around 60 or so were actually selected. And then, that's one filter you make it through. And then you end up in, phase one of the qualification course, which at the time that I went through was still very much also kind of an assessment as well. Now it's a little different. Now they look at the Q course more as a school, as a training environment where the cadre and the instructors are there to teach you tasks. While that was also true when I went through, they were also still very much assessing you. So the attrition rate in the Q course portion, which can take anywhere from 12 to 20 or so months, depending on the specifics, there were a lot more people, a lot more guys that were getting dropped from the course for not meeting certain standards. So just as you move from phase one to phase two to phase three, you're losing guys on the way as well. And then, you get to the end and whoever's left is who's at graduation with you.
Did you have any struggles or challenges along the way till graduation?
Oh yeah. Constant challenges. That's like kind of the whole point is, different types of challenges during different phases, so you're learning tactics, you're learning strategy, you're learning different techniques, but you're also learning, foreign language, and you're learning some, cultural dynamics through the course. You're learning like leadership principles. It's not all how many pull-ups can you do, how fast can you run, and how efficient can you clear a room with your CQB, abilities. There's a lot that's being thrown at you. I severely underestimated how difficult leadership attributes were going to be for me. Team dynamic was going to be for me. And then foreign language absolutely kicked my ass. So one of the differentiators between Green Berets and most of the other special operations units is we have to be proficient in a foreign language. That's a requirement. So you spend anywhere from 4 to 6 months in the Q course just learning a foreign language in a classroom. Like that's it. And I struggled with that. I mean, that was really difficult for me. So there were a lot of different points that were challenging. Most of it, was challenging, some easier than others for different people. But yeah, it's 2.5 or so years of consistent adversity and challenges.
So let's talk about what you just talked about with how the foreign language just be up and how, and there was, like you said, in the last 2.5 years, there's a lot of challenges and it's constant adversity the whole entire time. So how do you like I want to keep saying show up for yourself, but I mean, essentially, it's you have to do the work. Like my coach would always say, like, I could give you all the tools, but I can't drag you through the finish line. You have to take yourself. So, how do you take yourself through those adversities and those challenges and get to the end? And I understand, like, it's well, I had a goal and I was just shooting at that goal. What else can you say about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, you hit the nail on the head because for me, and I speak, I think for a lot, it begins and oftentimes ends with a clear vision of the desired end state, a high degree of clarity of the mission. Because, like, why are you putting yourself through this? And this is what I just had a conversation with some random TSA agent in the airport the other day as I was going through traveling, who's like, "Hey, I know who you are, and I want to be a Green Beret." We had a quick conversation, and I'm like, "Listen, know your why." And in my opinion, there's no wrong answer. Now, I may be unique with that opinion. Some feel that you need to have the right reason. I would argue that as long as your reason is grounded in truth and self awareness, then that's going to be the thing that gets you through those really hard times. When you're asking yourself, why take another step? Why try to do another rep? Why try to go do this task that I just completely failed again? That's going to be the answer to the question. And if you're lying to yourself about the reason why you're there, odds are it's not going to be strong enough to get you through it. So whether it's rooted in patriotism or desire to serve and defend your country, or you just want to see if you can do it. I just want to see if I can do it. Kind of the David